This is a demo of what I have done for PA2 for SE456. So just to start out, show the sprites. You can see it's a bit chaotic, but you've got the 10 to 20 sprites somewhere in there, and they come from the birds, the aliens, and Stitch right in the center there. So just to show a little bit of how it works, first you create your managers, which I made the managers by deriving from the base manager class, which uses nodes that derive from the base node class. And right now I'm differing my movements by an enum and movement type, and that's going to go away once I actually implement a better system for it. And then I also have a texture manager which holds the textures which the sprite factory uses in order to find the texture based on the enum name of the texture that you pass in along with the texture when you create it. And then in order to add the sprites to the sprite manager, you just have a general Azul sprite which goes to the sprite factory and creates it based on the enums, which in the sprite factory you can see I have a function for the bird sprites which gets the correct sprite rectangle based on the where it's supposed to be. And then the aliens have their own, and then Stitch has its own, just to keep it within the, so it doesn't have to keep finding them for different ones. So what else was there? I guess I'll show. So this one, the yellow bird, moves by translating the X and has a decreasing Y movement speed that resets to the positive value once it hits the bottom. And that bounce movement is applied to the Stitch in here as well. It's just these have a little extra, and the pig also bounces the same way, except it has adjusted speed, which you can adjust speeds based on this speed function, which is messy for now, but it's just a demo. And that's X speed, Y speed, and rotational speed. And then I also have a scale speed, which differs for the different objects that are doing the scale motion. These are just movements of when X gets too big or too low, and Y gets too big or too low. It changes directions in a decelerating fashion. And then this is just bouncing back and forth while rotating, and it hits walls on the X axis here, and then for rotation it hits it at -1 and 1. And then these are just inverse scales. It scales the Y inversely to the X, whereas these scales them together. And you can see the sprite boxes in the corner. I could not implement them properly into the manager because it's not a sprite, but I'll figure that out later. And I wanted to leave it here because they're probably useful for debugging purposes in the future. And then when you want to update, you go to sprite manager, you just call update. When you want to draw, you just call draw. And in the sprite manager, it just iterates through it, which I have an iterator inside the base manager class right now, so it just uses that for now until we implement iterators, which I think you said we were doing. And then it just calls draw on all of them and update on all of them. And when it adds a sprite to the manager, it just gets a node from the base class, how it's supposed to, which gets it from the, where is it? Right here. The create data link, which I changed it to a node, so I should probably change the function name, but it just returns the correct node type there. And then it sets the sprite based on the sprite you passed in and returns the node so that you can do things to it. And the sprite node. Right now it has a bunch of random values in it that I'm using for movement, but at its core, it just has the sprite inside it, plus probably the position, or the initial positions, and the scale. And then when it calls draw on it, it's just render and update. I have it updating through this apply transform function. So once I remove that, I can get rid of the rest of the demo, and in general it's just supposed to update the positions and angle and then update the sprite. And that about sums up what I did for this PA.